Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Quantum You Good Vibration podcast. And I've got an interesting guest with me today. I know you're going to enjoy every second of our conversation. And her name is Barbara Symons. And she wrote the book, Escaping Christianity and Finding Christ. And I don't think I'm going to carry on. I'm just going to ask you to introduce yourself, and then we go from there.
That's perfect. Again, Barbara Symons. I live in College Station, Texas. I'm a housewife, but former minister, teacher, still teach, speaker, somewhat of a counselor over spiritual topics. And I was within Christian fundamentalism for 43 years and decided to write a book of my exiting the traditional church system, and that's where Escaping Christianity, Finding Christ came about. So and I'm married for 46 years with 3 boys and 11 grandkids and 1 great-grandchild. So I stay busy with them, and I do a lot of interviews, and people are certainly interested in what I have to say now, way more than they were back in the 1990s. was almost very heretical back then, but not so much now. People are beginning to question a lot of the fear that they have been permitting in their spiritual practices. So it's all good, and it's a great message.
Yeah, thank you for that. Explain a little bit, because the people that are going to watch our show or are watching and listening would be interested in, how did this transition happen? What happened with you? What changed the way you saw fundamental Christianity? Does this mean religion, or what does it actually mean to you? And what happened when you started feeling like you're not fitting in this anymore? What was going on with you?
Wow, great question. Fundamentalism to me, Christian fundamentalism, is a very literal and rigid interpretation of Scripture. It is also involving a set of doctrine that is somewhat in common with other sects that my church had in common with other Christian sects. And it's a set of doctrines that you have to adhere to and you have to follow. Fundamentalism requires consensus for an adherent to feel safe. Because if you begin to question, then there is shunning, judgment, the threat of hell, torment, torture. So there's a lot of fear wrapped up in the belief system. And so they require that you stay very hemmed in with the traditional thinking on heaven and hell and getting saved and what that means, and accepting Jesus into your heart and what that means. And so I eventually, the thing that brought me the most change, Ronell, was I no longer believed in hell. I could not rationalize a loving Father that encouraged us to love unconditionally and to forgive our enemies while he burned his forever. It didn't make any sense to me. And so I began my questioning, but I began my questioning from within the church structure, which didn't go very well. I got in a lot of trouble, and but being somewhat youngish back in the 1990s, I didn't really think about the consequences. I thought everybody would leave and see what I was seeing, and so they would stay in the church, but the whole structure might change when they realize that God is love, that this loving Father that can be found within Christian fundamentalism isn't what we thought. But that's not what happened. I was shunned, dismissed, looked down upon, called a heretic, said I was deceived, called me a Satanist, a witch. I mean, they went into full on, not necessarily the pastor in the church structure, but the adherents within. The people within were the ones that I had the most problem with. And it was very hurtful. But, you know, I think that the hurt that I felt and the painful situations from within my friendships actually propelled me to dig deeper, propelled me to read. In other words, I didn't recoil from being dismissed or shunned or name called. I live in a relatively small community, and it's an incredibly Christian conservative community. So I didn't say, oh, okay, yeah, y'all are right, I'm sorry. You know, I didn't do that. I went, oh, really? Well, let me just read you this. And have you ever thought about that? And so I really began to question a lot of the tenets of the faith, which just got me in more trouble. But I began to find an audience outside of my community. And you know, Meta or Facebook has been a great platform just to be able to express what you're feeling without fear of retribution, you know, and to learn and to explore, which is the opposite of what I was told I could do within fundamentalism. I mean, there was a time when I did give in to some of the fear and the shunning. I had people come over to my home and say, you know, you can't be reading the Kabbalah. You can't be looking into this other stuff because that has demons attached to it and you're going to get in. So I just thought, well, okay. And I took all of my books that I had been studying out to my barbecue pit. And I just, you know, put as much lighter fluid. And, you know, what I found out was it takes a lot of lighter fluid to burn a book. Because I burned many things, but that period of time didn't last very long, because when you begin to awaken, when you begin to really sense freedom in your spiritual sojourn, there really is no turning back. You can't return to the restriction of a child, which is what fundamentalism is about. They do restrict you. They restrict your thinking, your consciousness. And one of my friends said, Barbara, the root broke the pot. You can't go back into restriction. And so I've stayed out ever since. But the thing that propelled me, you know, you asked, what was it? I started hearing, if you want to call it Holy Spirit, if you want to call it guides, you want to call it higher self, I began to hear and to perceive and to walk without fear, which was a major catalyst for me to say, well, you know what? Maybe communion isn't what we think it is. Maybe baptism isn't what we think it is. And, you know, so I began to fearlessly walk in the revelation that I was receiving. And that revelation was what bit by bit began to expand the consciousness that had been so stifled for so long. So receiving revelation was a big component of my unfolding.
So it's like we are speaking on a podcast about this the other day. So it's like you're on this wonderful island, you were sitting in a corner, but you really didn't realize what's out there. And then all of a sudden, and you were told there are people that are going to attack you when you leave that spot. And there's this awesome exploration or experience one can have, but you're stuck in the corner. And you started allowing, like a lot of people that are listening here to this podcast now, we started allowing for these thoughts or these ideas that are coming up to start germinating within us, because it opened up this awesome, divine, beautiful unfolding within us. And that is, it's for me, that's what you're explaining. And then you can't stop anymore because you realize, oh my gosh, there's a world out there. And I remember when I was reading your book and you mentioned the first time you were a deliverance minister. Now, just to explain to some people that might not know what that is, it's when you drive out demons. And when you become aware, you realize, well, if you're going to look for demons, you're going to find them. So you're going to have a ministry around something that you truly believe in, because we're so powerful as creators. You're going to create your scenario. But the point I'm making here is not that. It's the fact that you one day came home and there was a sick friend and she said, oh, we need to go and pray for our sick friends because she needs to be saved. And I know a lot of people listening will relate to this, where you stand there and all of a sudden you think, what is saved? Saved from what? So if you could expand on that, because I relate to that so much. I had that question. And then I started just saying, saved from what? And share your experience with that.
Oh my goodness. That was a touchstone moment for me, because my friend died in the wool, type of Christian fundamentalist. She was very concerned about this person's salvation. And when she went and asked me, do you think she's saved? We may need to go. Do you think she's saved? Hold on just a second. It disappeared from screen.
Am I there? Am I back?
Not yet. Let me see. Where did you go? I'm still looking.
Okay. Let me maybe I should move. Let me just pause the recording.
Oh, there we are.
Okay, back. Okay.
When she said, do you think that she's saved? Something clicked in me, but I went to answer and to give all the reasons why I thought she was, but I couldn't think.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know what the word saved meant. It was almost like, and I compared it to a computer when you would lose a program and it would go back in the day. My old 486 would go to a DOS prompt in a dark blue screen. That's what I felt standing there, trying to type in the word saved and see what would come up, because nothing was coming to my mind. And I thought, am I having a neurological event? Am I having a stroke? What is going on? So I looked over and I saw a table and I thought, okay, there's a table. I have that word. Okay, there's the door. Well, I have that word. There's a glass. There's a rug. And I would circle around and come back to the word saved. But I didn't know what it meant anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I was looking down at my hand and I saw an age spot, and I pulled up my skin and I had this incredible feeling of being the divine inside of a body. And I was having this visceral physical experience in that moment where I realized that being saved meant that we are immortal. That the scripture that we have so simplified by, God sent his son to save, I all of a sudden had all of these bits of information, this revelation coming in so fast. And yet the only thing that I could say to my friend was, am I saved? And I looked back at her and she looked at me like, what? And she said it out loud, what is wrong with you? And I said, saved isn't what we think it is. To save the body means we don't die ever. It's not that we, receive some kind of a rite of passage that when our physical body dies, we go into heaven. I said, that's not it. we've got it all wrong. And yet I was so certain of what I was saying, but I didn't have the words to articulate it.
Yeah.
I just knew that from that day forward, the word salvation and getting saved wasn't there anymore. I couldn't even see it like I once saw it. So
Yeah.
that literally happened in a moment. And I had several of those moments, that had happened would happen over the next, I don't know, year to 18 months that really set a foundation for me to say,
Mm,
okay, this is that. That's that's not the correct answer anymore. Who is Satan? Who is Satan and Lucifer? I had being a deliverance minister, don't you know that I saw a lot of miracles?
mm,
People ask me, well, what happened to that? How can you not believe in those miracles? And the only thing that I can say is that within the sphere of fundamentalism and operating within that sphere, it all works
yeah.
according to what we believe. But when you leave that, the rules are different.
Yeah.
And if I no longer look for evil, if I focus on things that are pure and lovely and of a good report, if I
Mhm.
look for those things, then that's what I'm going to find. And what a better way to live than to be fearful and finding a demon behind every door. So many things changed just on that one touchstone moment of what saved really means. And it's been a beautiful journey of discovery ever since. And it requires a fearlessness to
Mm,
be afraid. Fear is a very low frequency. And
mm,
when we operate in fear, we attract like frequency. So we attract situations that are fearful. But when you are joyful and following the edict of what the Christ told us to do over and over again, to find joy, that your joy may be full, when we focus on those things, then that's what we attract.
absolutely.
Mm.
Mm. Yeah, it makes such a difference because if you are the light and we are the light, and when you live in the tree of life, is there death in life? And I've watched so many NDEs, and so many times Christ met with the person and said, please tell the world there is no death. So I just love that you shared that. What is eternal life? That the body can actually transition like Christ did. All died in him, all rose, all is all. And he rose again. And I relate to Christ. I relate to life. I relate to my higher self being full of light, or the light. And I've also find it, as you said, it's I think you mentioned it, that the transition happened. It was not a bad thing. Like we'd say, it's a bad thing that you were a Christian, or you could have been a Hindu, or you could have been a Buddhist. For me, it's the same. So what do you say to it's actually the way to enlightenment, as I would call it, or awakening or awareness of your I amness can come from every direction. And we used to be told that's not possible. But what is your take on that?
Well, it's certainly possible. I view my time, first of all, every human being has a structure that is going to restrict them, whether it's a bad marriage, whether it's, fear at work, or, just trying to survive in our world, or. We all have those things that we need to overcome. For me, it was indoctrination into a system for 43 years.
Yeah.
And that indoctrination, brought me to where I am today, free.
Yeah.
So I can't, who can despise the woman or the womb that brought us to birth? Who can despise that? Within a fetus within the mother, things have to get restrictive
Mm,
for the babe to leave. Things have to become non-life giving. The
mm,
placenta begins to fail, and the environment just too restrictive. And so organically and naturally, what happens is not only does the babe begin to push, but the uterus has forceful contractions that push along with the baby's effort down the birth canal. And, we know what happens. The water breaks, and water represents consciousness.
Mm.
So the way that we breathed before becomes impossible
Yeah.
because the structure, number one, doesn't support it anymore, and the structure gives way.
Yeah.
And then we begin to pass through that narrow way of birth. And, for a normal birth, a vaginal birth, the water is forced from the baby's lungs. And
Mm.
it must begin to breathe and move and live differently. But
That is
who can
beautiful.
despise the mother?
Yes.
You
That is
know,
so good.
yeah. And so, and that's not, and not everybody is going to go through Christian fundamentalism,
Mm.
but we all have our structures, that we have chosen to overcome in this lifetime. And
Yes.
it's all good.
Like, I think you also wrote there about your son and how we chose certain things before we come to Earth. You're going to go into a three-dimensional or a dimension that's probably the most difficult dimension or challenging dimension in the galaxies, but we chose it, and a lot of us choose certain outcomes to awaken us in these journeys. And when you start on this journey, and I know you also shared, I don't know if you want to share about your son, because a lot of times there's choices we make, there's multi-billion choices we can make, but there's some things I've seen so many near-death experiences that where the people that shared it said they sat with their soul pack, or the soul people, the guardians, or with God, or the angels, or Christ, and they decided on certain things that they would want in their experience. They would, as this I am, as this divine being, would want this. Now, in our existence on Earth, this to the brain makes no sense. That's why peace surpasses all understanding when you know who you are in divine sense. So I don't know if you would like to expand on that and share a little bit. What is your experience and understanding concerning that? The choices, or could have been choices we made.
Another great question. I'm going to add something to the mix that I don't really talk about a lot, but I want to start with this. If the universe, multiverse, is vibrationally based, we know it is. It doesn't speak English or French or German. It is vibration. If, as God beings, divine beings endowed with a creative process, if we create by frequency and focus in the material world, which are the two components, divinity gives us the impetus and the direction, and our ego, that's very human, gives way to its own life and begins to focus on what it is that it is deems as important. Okay, so it focuses, gives emotion toward, and something is put into motion on a quantum level. And we are creators of reality. If that is true, and that's a mouthful, if we create by focus, thought, and emotion, then why do we come here but to learn how to emote? And what helps us emote but experience? And what will give us the full spectrum of emotions, but experiences that are both light and dark? And so we come here as divine beings, having sorted out our palette and what tubes of paint we want to open to fill our palette so that we can create a masterpiece in whatever area of the multiverse we end up in. But we know we need experience.
That's it.
And it is said of the Christ that he learned through the things that he suffered. Yes, we learn by joy and joyful things and experiencing wonderment, but as beings that are able to feel not only physical but emotional pain, we learn the quickest by the things that we suffer. So therefore, the beings out in the multiverse that want to learn sign up for this honor, this privilege, this royalty to become flesh and blood, to enter into a university within the universe, to learn through the things that we experience. So when I heard, here's my son missing an arm and a leg, and we don't know whether he's going to live or die, and I'm having this weird experience in the emergency room, and I'm walking in front of this saltwater aquarium, and I stop, and something happens to me again, similar to the DOS screen on my computer going blank. I was watching these beautiful fish in this saltwater aquarium at Houston's top trauma center, waiting to hear if my son is going to make it. 28 units of blood and 8 units of plasma. Blood pressure was 50/20. The doctor comes and says, we have to take his leg. It's too badly damaged. I say, go do what you have to do. I get up and I'm wandering, and this whole room is filled with people that are struggling, wondering whether their loved ones are going to make it. And I stop and I look at this saltwater aquarium, and my mind went shh, and it just completely shut down. And all of a sudden I felt like I was being lifted upward, not much, but just a little bit. And I heard, Barbara, it's time you remember that he chose this, and so did you. And all of a sudden, boom, I was back on my feet. I was looking around the room. I was thinking, what the heck just happened to me? And I thought, no, I didn't. What mother would you? Of course he didn't choose that. Who? But as you said, our memory as human beings, our memory is limited to a very narrow bandwidth of frequency. So we remember things that have to do with our terrestrial life here in this lifetime. But it was telling me of a time from before then. And I said, who would choose to feel something like this? And that's a question I get asked all the time. I can look around the room and I can see women that were sexually abused or raped or beaten. I see these horrible things, and having to stand in front of them and say, oh no, you chose this. And so I'm sitting there and I'm saying, no, 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 no. And the voice began to speak again, except this time some kind of a connection had been established, because I wasn't out of my body anymore. And my mind wasn't still. And the voice spoke directly to me and said, Barbara, your understanding is at its basis is flawed, because you think that you chose these experiences as a human being. Your format in the third dimension, you eat from the tree that knows between good and evil, right and wrong, desirable, undesirable. That's what the ego is hardwired to do as a human being. But when you made these decisions, you were not human, you're divine. And you set your course and your syllabus to learn everything you could according to what you have chosen. And there is no suffering in vain. All suffering has value. You make decisions of what you want to experience according to purpose. And I just went, whoa. And I said, okay, I get it. And it went on to tell me to bridge the gap, bridge the gap, bridge the gap. And I said, I felt like I was losing my mind, because the voices wouldn't stop. Whatever had opened up in me, the information was flowing in at such a rate, and I was completely overwhelmed. But I knew that I had received an edict to bridge the gap. And I said, when I was up in his the shock trauma intensive care unit, it's called the STICU, STICU, shock trauma intensive care unit. and he was unconscious, and they had filled him so full of fluids, to keep his blood pressure, up, that his body was so bloated and it was unrecognizable. And as I walked around his bed, just back and forth, just walking around and listening to the beep of the machines and just the whole experience, I was hearing this voice telling me to bridge the gap,
Mm.
bridge the gap, bridge the gap. And I finally said, all right, look, I have very human physical things to attend to. I will bridge the gap. You're going to have to tell me what that means, but not now. You need to let me tend to my son. And so from that point on, that voice stopped, temporarily, but the edict was there, and I knew that I had to break out of my limitation and begin to build a link between what we remember as a human being and what we have experienced as a divine being, to begin to remember who and what we are as divine humans, having a human experience as a spiritual impetus, having a very human experience, and to remember why we've come.
So do you have people, when you share the story, that get very frightened, that, oh my gosh, what's going to happen to me? How do I know whether this is like my divine plan, or is this something that is just happening because I created it? Do you have those questions?
I haven't. What I do experience is this: when there is resistance, and it's just, I have a woman that I speak about, and she's now a friend, but I was speaking to a room of about maybe 45 or 50 people. And as I was telling them he chose this part of the story, I see people go like this all over the room.
Mm.
But I also see people go like this. So they either lean back and reject it, or they lean in. And it's not my responsibility. It's my responsibility to give the message. And I believe that we can't get this wrong. Every single human being will come to that point of awakening and understanding in their own time and in their own way. And it may not look like what I'm saying, and that's okay. So the ones that cross their arms, they may be thinking in terms of fear, like you said, but mostly they don't really have anything to do with me from that point on. It's the
That is
people
sorted.
it's the people that say, oh my gosh. And there was one woman that leaned in when I began to talk. I said it was November 13th, 2005, and that was the day of the accident, and that's how I began the talk. And she began to lean in, and as I spoke, she wept. Her shirt was soaked with tears and her face was bright red. And afterwards, I went up to her and I said, I couldn't help but notice, are you okay? And she said, yes, yes, yes. You have given me understanding. My son was murdered November 13th, the prior year. And it was a hate crime for being gay. And he was set on fire and burned. It was a horrible thing for a mother to find out about. But she got it. She got it in a moment. And it changes the way you see things. And I think everybody will get to that point. I attended a conference in Palm Springs. It was a CPAC, the convention, the conference on procession and ancient knowledge. And up there, they're talking about the science behind our journey and the astronomy and so on. And one of the men got up there and said, you'll understand this when you understand that you chose this. And I was like, yes. So I can see it, the message is pollinating around the earth. And we will see eventually that we are far more powerful than what we give ourselves credit for. And we are in it to win it. We are in it to gather and accrue as much experience as we can, because we are adept co-creators of reality and
Mm,
always have been.
absolutely. I've experienced this year, I had something happen, and the thing that, like you said, the resistance came, I really focused on allowing that all scenarios to be. And by allowing all scenarios to be what it was, allowing it to pass through, and just the outcome to be a yes and amen to all that I am, yet allowing, sometimes we don't allow ourselves to think this could be bad. It's more like you just say, it's a resistance because of the fear of experiencing more of that, but it's actually the opposite that is true. So just like you were sharing, when we have something, we hear something, instead of going full out, I don't want this. And it's okay that it can take 3 days at times. I've had when something really shocks you out of your seat, it sometimes take a few days to just readjust. It doesn't matter how aware one is. And that situation, then to allow it to be the goal, to be the gold nuggets that it is. And I found the easiest way is to truly allow every scenario without fear. But it takes a bit of practice to walk this out. And for those that are listening, and sometimes, you go, I don't know if you have something for them, if they're going through something difficult, or, to how would you advise or inspire them to handle something, or not handle, or let it go? What would you normally say to people that are listening and they might be sick, or they might having something difficult? Now, I know you said, it could be that somebody chose this, but some people can't initially just deal with it, that it's just that simple.
Right. I understand the question. There are things in my life today that I have to make the choice to allow and not to control. My husband says the most unhappy people in the world are those that are trying to control another person. So I have a situation in my life that I wish was different. Just someone very dear to me is a drug addict and an alcoholic, and I started going to Al-Anon just to try and get some peace. And Al-Anon is a system for the families and friends of addicts. And so the very first step in Alcoholics Anonymous, or AA, is to admit your powerlessness over alcohol. And in Al-Anon, for the families and friends of addicts, do you know what the first step is? To admit you're powerless over alcohol. And so I have to say, in a situation where it involves, something painful that another is going through, that this is their life. This is what they've chosen. And they are not going to learn by my words. They're going to learn through their experience. And I remember just 2 weeks ago, I read this meme that said it took me 2 years to learn how to talk and 60 years to learn how not to talk. But like you said, to allow others the experience and the outcome of their experiences, to allow that, Greg Braden says, is one of the highest levels of mastery. Enter into that. We know so little about what our resistance offers. You know, the brain and the mind is so powerful, even when it comes to sickness in the body, to adopt more of a, I wonder what this experience is going to bring me. I know that that has to have a greater impact on our body, much more benevolent than resistance and anger or hurt or fear.
Yes.
So
I love that scripture. All things work out for my good. The thing is, and to allow that to be whatever version that is, because we love to say that, but we, like you said, most of us don't, we can't stop holding on to the thing. So we say all things work out for my good. I'm going to allow it to work out despite of, just because I'm divinely loved, just because I'm here to experience whatever this means to me. And that is a true letting go. That is a true surrender of trust in, because your divine, your beingness also calls out and brings things forth so that you can evolve, to experience who you truly are. And this 3D experience, this 3D world we live in, that is full of matter, it offers this opportunity to discover. So I love how you share, to allow and to let these things be. And that is the highest, like you said, Greg Braden said, it's the highest, to allow people to also be who they are, to give space to people to be who they are. And yeah, it's just an amazing thing. So now that you're living this life of discovery, I don't know what you would call it, expansion and discovery, but it probably feels like you like, just when one thinks you've arrived, you actually know you haven't. There's just a world opens up. So where are you at the moment? What is exciting for you? What are you discovering? What opened up for you since you really started this journey of allowing everything to show you your direction, allowing spirit to show you things you didn't know before?
there's a book that's called The World's 16 Crucified Saviors, and it was written in the 1800s. I know, it's really cool. And in the book, he says that information comes to us as our ability to retain, to absorb, to assimilate, to digest, as our ability to do that um, occurs. And so information comes to us organically as we are able to, number one, I love what you said, don't resist. But, this passing age is based on learning through the intellect. But the age to come is learning through intuition. And so it's not the same anymore. There are people that say, well, I used to get offerings and I used to, make money doing this and that, and it's just not that way anymore. And I see these teachers and preachers trying to still earn money and a living, and it just doesn't work, because what our role is activating people, or leaving a breadcrumb, or just saying, hey, have you thought about not resisting? Have you thought that maybe you chose this? Have you thought maybe saved isn't what you think it is? And once those walls begin to come down, then they can organically begin to see on their own. And one of the most liberating things, when I realized there wasn't any hell, when I realized that Satan and Lucifer were not one and the same, when I had all of these interesting, facts come, I thought, oh my God, what am I going to tell my kids? I taught them all wrong. And I just thought, oh my gosh. And I heard that voice from within say, what makes you think you're responsible for their journey? And I was like, oh, well, as a parent, I know that I need to feed and to clothe and to care and to nurture. But as far as their spiritual journey, man, I felt more than ever hands off. And I
Mm.
stopped speaking to them because I mean, I used to flip the lights on Sunday morning and turn the praise music on and say, God requires your presence at church. Come on, boys, let's get up. And, literally, probably overnight, I went, oh, I don't have to do this.
Mm.
This is their journey.
That's so true.
So I'm learning really how to tap into that intuitive side.
Mm.
That's what's been the most powerful, and to have a dalliance with science, to
Mm.
understand that, when Jacob's head was on the rock revealed information. I'm trying to lay my head on the rock, and
Yeah.
what Jacob, which is a metaphor for the ego, he was learning through revelation with his head on the rock revealed knowledge, that there are messengers that ascend and descend down this staircase, that as you study it, it has connotations of being a spiral. And so Jacob is seeing into the DNA molecule and understanding that this part of us is divine and holy. And even in our science terms, it describes RNA as messengers within our own cells, that information comes and goes. And if you look scientifically at some of these um, photographs of what viruses look like, they are created. They are they are created by master geneticists.
Mm.
The Elohim is not singular, it's plural.
Mm.
So as we begin to just peruse some of the science materials and mingle them with some of the mysteries in scripture, we find this grand story of who we are and why we're here. We can even look into precession, this great swath of time that we're involved in. It takes 24,000 years to complete. For
Mm.
those that want to look into precession, look up CPAC. Look up a man named Walter Cruttenden. He's got a book called The Lost Star, which talks about our sun having a relationship with a binary partner
Wow.
and going through this journey of 24,000 years, where we begin at the golden age and we are slowly baptized into the dark ages,
Mm.
where we hold our divine breath at that point of the greatest darkness. But then we begin to come up and out of those waters as we head back to the golden age. It takes 24,000 years. And we jump in and out of biology to acquire and to accrue as much experience as we can during that 24,000 year cycle. Way too much to go into right now, but
No, it's great. It's
fantastic
great.
information. It's
What
wonderful.
I love it. I love your passion because I relate to that so much. I've never been so excited about life as now. Science really proves everything, and it's so beautiful to combine because everything is one. And when we realize the universe is alive, and even if you go into the Hebrew writing, that the yod is in every single letter and every single atom, and it's serving you, it's serving us and bowing to our every need. And here we are discovering all of this. It just makes life so adventurous. And I think that's what we were supposed to. And when I listen to you, and I know our audience as well, I feel you so much because your enthusiasm and passion, it is so exciting. And it's amazing how you describe it. One can feel you very authentic in what you've discovered. I'm not going to say believe, because it's discovery, isn't it? It's discovery of what's already there. And I know we've been going on near an hour, but I would like, before we kind of end this, I would love you to share about your new book, or a bit of information about where people can find you. But first, just go into your new book, what it's called, what inspired you to write it, what it's about, and where people can find it.
Okay, well, the first book, Escaping Christianity, Finding Christ, is more autobiographical, but it also builds as you go through the book. it was designed by guides, or whatever you want to call it, to slowly baptize the reader into the intuitive mind, and builds throughout the chapters and brings you deeper and deeper and deeper into those intuitive fields. You begin to look at what, communion, the broken bread, Jesus Christ said, "I'm the bread that came down from heaven." If we are the metaphor of Christ, then did we come down from heaven? And what did we break? We broke our immortality, and we became human, and we were swallowed. This is called the crypt, or the sepulcher. We were swallowed into the mortal realm, being completely mortal for a time. There's just so much that I try to expose the reader to see things differently, to activate that side of the brain that is mystical and artistic and imaginative, and the part of the brain that contains the mysteries. And so that was escaping Christianity and finding Christ. And then someone said, "Boy, I wish I had all of your articles on social media in one place." And I said, "I can do that." So the second book is called Musings from an Ex-Christian Fundamentalist, and it is a compilation of 6 years worth of articles, 444 pages of articles. So it's not an autobiographical form. It's kind of more like a journal, where you can take a page or two at a time and just ponder, like I'll write about Christmas, and I'll write about the great year, or I'll write about, what it means to be baptized, or I'll write up what is saved. So it has a lot of articles that were written from 2014 to 2020. And so that's the second book, Musings from an Ex-Christian Fundamentalist. But the place that people can connect with me is through Meta or Facebook, and it's just Barbara Symons, Symons. And I really do try to answer when people ask questions through the messaging app. I really do try my best to keep up with people. It's becoming increasingly difficult, but I am still trying to keep up with it.
Do you also offer coaching for people that need help with this, that people that say, "Okay, I need to speak to Barbara privately"? Do you offer a coaching session that people can connect with you?
I've been asked, and I have coached, but what I prefer is for people to learn their own inner coach, because where I would fail miserably, their inner coach knows them implicitly and what they need. So it's really more of helping people to turn within, that every single person lacks nothing, that everyone has the ability to hear, but we have to stop extending outward to somebody that they think can help them, when it really is internal. So more than anything, I just try to direct people to themselves, who knows them way better than I could.
But I love that you say that, because that also comes from groups and getting so used to that I have to follow somebody. Somebody is always knows more than I do. And to go back to neutrality and zero about anything anybody said. It's not like we don't value wisdom. It's just that go back to not fundamentally, but the 0 point where you realize, you can go within. And I've had so many of these dreams before, where you just, in any situation, turn within, because the answer lies right there, the diamond, everything you're looking for. And I actually love that you say that, to encourage people to be inspired to turn within.
And it all that is, as we are able to contain it, all that is faithful to dispense.
Mm.
You know, I mean, I can remember I was like, oh, what do I do? Where do I go? I don't have my tribe anymore. And you know, I would go up to the bookstore and I would just look at the shelves, and inevitably there'd be a book that I just had to have. And I would reach for it and feel all tingly, and then I would read it. It gave me exactly what I wanted. Or I'd go to my mailbox and someone would have put a book in there for me. Or someone would send me an article or
Mm.
a video to watch. And you know, the teacher, you know, when you've heard the axiom, when the student is ready, the teacher appears.
Mm.
Absolutely, 100%. It doesn't ignore anybody. We all have access to that. It's whether or not we look externally or
Mm.
internally. I had a friend, I'll say this real quick, who came to me in 2012, and amazing apostolic prophetic teacher, nationally known, internationally known, came to my home and said, you know, you can't be teaching that there is no Satan, because I have stood toe to toe with him.
Mhm.
You can't say there's no hell, because I've been there. And I looked at her and I said these words: these things will appear externally from you as
Mhm.
long as you need them to,
Mhm.
because that's how the ego learns. But
Mhm.
they are internal principles
Yeah.
that are part of our own psychological makeup. And when we are ready to understand that everything has been externalized for the ego to learn, but
Mm.
everything is internal and very, very accessible for those that ask.
I love
So
that you say that. I love, sorry to interrupt. I love that you say that. There's a guy called Tom Caron, and he said, it's not out of the blue, it's out of you.
yeah,
That is so
exactly.
good. Yeah. And when you start living that way and you're not victimized by the reality of things showing up, but rather saying, okay, what is the gold in this? What am I going to experience as my amness in this situation I'm here to experience? And this is happening within me. This is, like you said, it's showing up. So we don't like to say, okay, this could have come out of me, but and we all one, and it's just it's such a vastness and such a expanse of, and the essence of who we are is so exciting. Yet we like we said, the things that show up, it's sometimes not that easy. So we're
Right.
not sitting here and saying, oh well, you should just be okay and just realize that it's that you created it, because it's the mind will just fight against that. It's something that is worked out. And that isn't there a scripture in the Bible where it says, work out your own salvation?
Mhm.
Just a reminder of the scripture. So would you like to just talk about that scripture, and then we can maybe end with that, because I find that explains a lot in a different way than what we used to.
It does, you know, again, the term salvation and being saved, there is a grand plan. If divinity walked in my front door right now and came in, I'm hosting a dinner party on Saturday, and wanted to taste a steak, wanted to smell my grandbaby's newly lathered hair, shampooed hair, wanted to have a cigar, wanted to have a good glass of wine, wanted to experience orgasm.
Mm.
If the divine came in and wanted to do those very physical things, it could not without a helpmate.
Yeah.
And so, over the billions of years, this plan was enacted. You know, Carl Sagan says if you want to bake an apple pie from scratch, you must first create the universe.
Okay, expand on that. That just
God, the I am, wanted a physical experience.
yes. Oh my
It
gosh.
had to
Wow.
first create a physical universe to do it within.
Oh my gosh, that is so beautiful.
And so this great plan that spans, so such a large swath of what we call time,
Mm.
but it incubated a star and put into motion the planets and the cycles, and then created an atmosphere which took billions of years to accrue, then began to set out the edict, for a biological helpmate that was suitable. And so now we're finding out that 2-foot hominids were on the earth the same time 10 and 12-foot beings were here. And it's because the intelligence seeded the planet with all of this potential. It
Mm.
was like this huge science fair project where everyone had to come up with some kind of a vehicle for the divine to inhabit. And it found one, between 2 and 300,000 years ago. It found us and it said, there it is. And it tweaked our DNA by splicing the number 2 chromosome with 2 or 3 others. That's why the second chromosome is large. It gave us language. It gave us complex speech. It gave us the ability to sing. It gave us so many things. But these master geneticists said, we have found our beloved. And the human form was privy to the information, like Mary was. And the messenger came and said, you are going to become pregnant with the holy thing. We said, let it be unto me as you have spoken. And now the divine has co-partnered with us through our DNA. If it inhabited us all at once, it would have blown our neural network. But what has happened is we have been inoculated with something small, just like a little mustard seed in a garden, that has been growing over the millennia and is producing the babe called Emmanuel, that is God with man.
Mm.
As man, a being that can create and expand this multiverse that was created for us to inhabit. And yet, how do we create without first going to school to learn the components of emotion? Because emotion is frequency and vibration. And when Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead, he did it with grief. He groaned. Jesus wasn't moved, the example, the pattern, Jesus wasn't moved by his emotions. He moved his emotions and raised Lazarus from the dead. And the key to understanding this beautiful metaphor is that not only are we the Christ, Mary, Martha, but we're also Lazarus. And we are the ones that will call to Lazarus for our own salvation, to be saved and to shed those grave clothes. That's what being saved is. That is salvation. And that is what we are working out.
That was
But
so
we must understand that the story is so big.
so big.
And we have been hemmed in so small.
Yeah. And the beginning of it all is to allow this to unfold. You see,
exactly.
Like you were saying, we have the ability to, that's within us, and we are here to expand. But you first, all the listeners, you have to allow this expansion. You have to allow whatever Barbara was saying now, you need to allow this to open up within you, because we can hold it closed, or we can answer the call, like, like I'm going to say the call, the voice, like all of you that listen, you probably have this nudging, there's got to be something else, there's got to be something more. Just allow for it to just show up the way it's going to show up. There's no stopping it, is there, Barbara?
There's no stopping it, and we can't get this wrong. I think we can speed time up, because it says that had times not been cut short. I know that alchemy is turning base metal into gold, and base metal, the Dark Ages, the Iron Age, we can speed things up just by, like you were saying, allowing and
Mm,
not resisting. What
yeah.
is this? What does this circumstance have for me? What can I learn by this? And when we draw boundaries, not necessarily in concrete, but in sand,
Yeah.
say, maybe this doesn't make sense to me right now, so I'm going to put it up on a shelf. But I'm not saying no. I'm saying just not now.
So you also
And
had the shelf. You also had the shelf. I used to like hear about somebody, you know, the cloud of witness, and I would put it on the shelf. I didn't quite understand, but I would just put it on the shelf. So for everybody listening, just get a shelf where you keep. That's such a good reminder. If there's something somebody doesn't understand or feel this is quite scary and you could go wrong, put it on the shelf and it will just keep on expanding. It will open up for you in a very sure way. I just have so much fun with you, Barbara. Thank you so very much. I
you're so
think this
welcome.
is such a timely, and you would say timely message. It's a wonderful unfolding of where we come from to really allow for God to, whoever you want to call God's source, Christ, universe, to show up in the way it was meant to show up in our lives.
Mhm.
So I don't know if you want to just share one last thing, or if you have something on your heart that you just want to give the audience. I think you've said a lot of very good stuff, very, very many beautiful and powerful things you just said that changes life and inspires to change. If there's anything else you feel you want to share, I'd love you to do that now.
One of the things that helps me is I will feel and hear a knock um, in my consciousness, and I will hear a word or a phrase that repeats. And if I will just sit down and center myself, and I even just type out the word or the phrase, that's
Mhm.
like a kickstarting action that is notifying the spirit in a very tangible way that I am poised to hear.
Mm, mm,
And then I'll just type, or I'll sit and just think and ponder, and information will begin to flow. This isn't a hard thing, and when I hear people talk about how they channel, you know, Cryon or Mark, Michael Archangel, whatever. I think that everybody channels,
mm,
but they're able to channel their highest self that exists in a dimension beyond this one, that is there for our guidance. We're multidimensional beings.
mm,
We all have the capability to listen. That's what the disciples were. They were 12 multidimensional aspects of us. And when I think it was Jesus that, he was asking, who do you say that I am? And they were all saying, well, you're Isaiah, you're blah, blah, blah. And it was Simon that said, I say you're the Christ. And Simon means listening,
mm,
listen. And
mm.
so he said to Simon, very well, you have heard well, but no man has told you this, but
Yeah.
my Father who is within. Therefore, I'm going to name you Peter, Revelator, Rock. And on this rock, I will build and establish the church, which is not what we think it is.
Mhm.
The church, the ecclesia, called out ones. It means you hear the call and you begin to manifest your identity out. And so everyone has Simon that is changed to Peter. Everyone has that aspect within their multidimensional self.
Yeah.
And so all we have to do is speak it forth, and the
Mm,
information begins to flow. But you'll still be human. You're just developing your divine aspect of listening. And there were times when Peter's ego got the best of him, because just a couple of verses later, Jesus was preparing them by saying, I'm going to have to die. I'm going to do this. And Peter said, may it never be.
Mm.
And what did Jesus say? Satan, get behind me. For your thinking is not on the divine plan, but on the things of man.
Yeah.
And so we all have all of these different aspects of our psyche. And you will fall and you will fail and you will succeed and you will shine. And it's all a part of the experience. But don't be afraid to try. That's what I would say.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. And thank you so much for being here today. Like I said, we shared where everybody can go hold of you. I'll put the links there for everybody. But thank you so much. I think it's a lot for people to really go and enjoy, but not in a negative way. It's a really good message you gave today. And I think it's going to help many people. And where do they get your books? Where can they do? Can one buy them on Amazon?
Sure.
We'll put the links there. We'll put the link on there as well. But thank you so very much. And for everybody, goodbye until our next Good Vibration talk show. Goodbye.